Hey, everybody, welcome to the Unconventional Therapist Guide to Nothing. My name is Dave. I'm joined here with my co host, Greg.
Yup.
That's
So
it.
Dave, we're turning every Halloween. It's weird. We kind of turn into a literature podcast.
For
One
one
episode.
spooky episode.
And I love it.
You love it.
Well, here's the thing. You kind of approached me and you said, "Hey, look, I've never read this. I've always wanted to read it, and why don't we give it a shot?" And I was thinking maybe we would read it to the people so they didn't have to. But that was a little bit much.
It's longer than most short stories.
Yeah, it's almost well, Poe writes a lot of long short, and so does Stephen King. Maybe
Yeah.
he's the king of writing. Maybe that's why he's the king of writing long ass short stories.
Yeah, there are
But
some that are kind of long. Yeah.
yeah, like overwhelmingly long. Like Shawshank Redemption.
That's a short.
That's a short story. So is Apt
Hmm.
Pupils. So is like you know um the Stand By Me. That's a short story. I mean, it's long,
It is long.
you know? So, but today, Dave, what I like most about this story in a way, first of all, it's very American. It's
Super
very,
American.
it's super American. And I think it is our original urban legend.
Yeah. It really touches. I actually think that's a very overarching theme
Hmm,
is like urban legends, how they change, how they can differ from different perspectives, the art of storytelling within storytelling, right?
absolutely.
Layers.
Yeah, meta.
Boom.
It's like the scream of 1820.
Yeah.
But I'll tell you, and what's cool about this, in terms of even playing off that urban legend thing, because when you hear an urban legend, it's different from like a myth or a fable, because myths are sort of creation, historical, and fables are more like animals talking to each other. So
Yeah.
what's interesting about this is it's kind of in a way believable, and it's kind of passed down in a weird way. Like urban legends is like my cousin's friend. We talked about that in our urban Legends episode, but this is more like found footage, right? It's like from the papers of Deirdre Knickerbocker.
Which, was it, when did we last talk about that? That just came up recently. We talked about it
Dracula,
because
I think.
yeah, well, we talked about it recently. We brought up Dracula and we brought up Frankenstein, how both of those novels are written in that way where it's like recollected or it's somebody's like journal entry. And that's essentially what this is. Well, two things. First off, you have a catchphrase, I think, and I just noticed it.
I do.
But now I forget what it is. So I'm gonna have to rewind later and like listen to it. But I'm like, you said something, and I'm like, I think he says that every episode. It's like, yeah, but yeah, but and or something like that. I gotta replay that
That's a
back.
terrible catchphrase. I hope that's not it.
I can't wait to listen to it back and then like make a t-shirt of it for you. Um, but then the other thing is, oh man, I just lost what the other
No, it
thing
was the
was. We didn't
Gothic
even say
episode.
we didn't even. Oh, it was the Gothic episode. We didn't even
Yeah.
say what book this is yet.
Well, before we do, let me say this. It's setting is more important than anything, and then so that's probably a good reason why we didn't. And it's set in this quaint little town that I've been to, and you've probably been to too,
I
Tarrytown,
just
New
went
York,
to it. Yeah, a few weeks ago.
affectionately known as Sleepy Hollow. Right? This is the tale. This is the thing that we all kind
Yeah.
of it's in the consciousness of America, I
Did
think.
you go to Washington to the cemetery?
I did. Yeah.
Yeah.
I love this. It's similar to Salem in a way.
Mm,
You didn't get that?
mm, it's only in the fact that like it's a
Something
thing
sleepy there.
that's like got some lore to it, but like
Yeah.
I found it to be the actual town itself to be very like Salem's a whole thing. Salem is very like what's the word, consumerism, and
Yeah.
like like they're very conscious of like we have a brand here and we're going to like utilize that to make businesses that are all themed around this thing that like gives us notoriety. There's history, but then there's also so much consumerism.
So do you think that Sleepy Hollow in like sort of going with the story, it's remained sort of rural and kind of I don't know, quaint?
I mean, it's just significantly less.
Yeah.
of whatever. It's like the cemetery, it's a couple of other locations, and then there's the rest of Tarrytown, which is just a
Normal.
typical New York town in that area, you know?
I like that area though. It's to me that like see it just makes me every time I go to somewhere like that, it does really make me love New England. New England's pretty great for this kind of stuff.
Yeah.
So let's get into this plot a little bit.
So the Legend of Sleepy Hollow by
Yeah.
Washington Irving. Washington the Man Irving. That was his
Mm.
nickname. It's actually on his tombstone.
Rip Van Winkle. He wrote that too, which is another
Old
favorite.
Rip.
That's right.
Old
Sleepyhead.
Rip. So Washington Irving was born in 1783. That is a very long time ago.
Hmm.
Did you know that?
I did. I knew it was just post the revolution, and there's still like some anxieties about that kind of stuff, and that's kind of where the story comes
Did
from. Yeah.
did you have some anxieties about that kind of stuff?
About the revolution, not really.
Oh,
I'm
you
okay. Well, I'm starting to again, actually. You
yeah.
know,
Yeah.
the way things are going.
So this book was first published in 1820. So we just missed its 200-year birthday like 4 years ago. So
Yeah,
if
and
this
think about
podcast
how
was going 4 years ago, we should have done it then.
he's young writing this. It doesn't
Mm,
feel like that, you know.
37.
Yeah, I mean that's well, I guess
I mean, that's like a
I let's
baby.
yeah,
If you
it's
ask me, that's a
the baby.
baby.
Yeah, yeah, I know.
So Greg, should I talk a little bit about Irving?
If you want to, sure.
All right. Well, he was the son of a New York City merchant, and he had family connections in the Westchester County, New York area. And he stayed in Tarrytown as a child. And during that time, he became very like um, fond of that area, I guess you would say, including what, the village we now know as Sleepy Hollow. And in 1835, he bought a cottage in Tarrytown and was buried at the Sleepy Hollow Cemetery upon his death in 1859. So that's, just a brief little summary of him and his connection to Tarrytown, which is really important to this story. The story being, directly related to Tarrytown and things that kind of happened in that area, as you were talking about, like the American Revolution and everything like that that happened in
The town is
that area.
certainly it is almost like when we were talking about Gothic where like the setting plays a huge role. And there's a supernatural element, the setting plays a role. I think
Yeah.
it's definitely a character in the story where it's set.
Can I just actually take a little sidestep for a second?
Sure, sidestep.
I had like a Mandela effect when I went there
Hmm,
to Sleepy Hollow Cemetery. In my mind, I thought there was an actual statue, like a stone statue of the headless horseman in Sleepy Hollow Cemetery. There is not.
okay.
There is a sculpture, a metal sculpture that like sits outside of the cemetery. There is no statue, stone, like I said, like marble, stone, whatever
Yeah,
statue in the cemetery. And I swore I thought I saw one in like a social media tourist video of Sleepy Hollow or something like that.
maybe you saw the actual Headless Horseman in a video.
Well, they do have the headless horseman rides in the cemetery on Halloween, which is
That is
pretty
so
awesome.
awesome, yeah.
Yeah,
Does he throw a pumpkin? I don't
I
wanna
don't know. I
spoiler
really
alert.
would love to see that. Did
Yeah.
But that was like this weird Mandela effect because I literally thought I saw it. Like many times, I actually thought I saw it, and then I got
Yeah.
there and there was nothing.
Hmm. Delusion disorder? Maybe.
Mandela effect. It
Oh,
used to be there.
call it what you wanna call it.
I transported to a different timeline that does not have one.
You seeing things that aren't there, not concerning at all, right?
Sure.
Okay. So,
So
let's get
so
into the
the
plot of this thing a little bit.
Well, yeah. Well, I just want to say, like, as you were mentioning, like the American Revolution in this upstate New York was like it was a combat zone there.
Mhm.
And there was it was a confusing, I guess, land or is considered like neutral ground, that area. And it had a mix of like British troops, German mercenaries, and Patriot militiamen. The only reason why I even say that is because of what the Headless Horseman is. But I'll save that so we can get into the plot a little bit of Legend of
Yeah,
Sleepy Hollow because
save
I
it.
might be getting ahead of ourselves.
Germans have always struck fear in the hearts of all sort of soldiers, as it seems, right?
Wow. Yeah, you're going there.
Well, I went there, right? So
What do
Ichabod.
you mean, Greg?
What could I be referring to? Yeah.
Yeah.
So Ichabod, who I always so my first sort of
Oh, I love that
introduction
you're
to
saying
this
this. Yeah, I know
story
where you're
is
going.
the Disney one.
Yes, yes,
Oh man, and so I always kind of thought Ichabod was this like sympathetic character,
yes.
you
So did
know?
I. I had the same thought, and you're gonna say now you have a different version of
I
him.
really do.
It's
I really
so bizarre.
it
Is
almost
it?
it's like so like if you've seen the and by the way, Bing Crosby narrating the Disney one, I did do it again this year with the kids. It's great.
Oh, I watched it last year. I was about to watch it this year. I haven't gotten to it yet, but that happens every.
Perfect.
That's I used to do it all the time, and then I just brought it back recently. It's a great tradition.
It is, and I'll tell you, it really flipped things for me though, because in the Disney one, you're like, oh, Brahm is kind of this bully jerk, and Ichabod is this guy who's just trying to make his way, and he can't help it that he's just all the ladies swoon when they see him, and he's just
So
not as strong.
was that the way it was portrayed, or was that our interpretation when we were younger?
Well, exactly, and here's the thing, what's enduring about this story is that it leaves itself wide open for interpretation, we'll talk about that, but that's what's kind of awesome about this tale, it's like, you read it and you get something, I read it and I get something totally different, and it's not unlike The Alchemist, where it's like these great sort of tropes and this kind of stuff we can all kinda get behind. Okay, so it's this great little town, it's set during, like, the revolution, and there's a ghost in it. It's like, "Okay, great, I'm in already. What else can I get out of this story?" So back to Ichabod, who is this, skinny schoolmaster. He's kinda severe, he's kinda mean to the kids. He beats the kids.
Well, yes, he has a disciplinary style, right?
He does.
You know, so here's a another interesting thing. Um, think about the description of Ichabod and his last name.
Mm,
So Crane,
yep,
bird like. They talk about him having like a nose, like this long beak of a nose.
right.
He's described as like a snipe, which is also a type of bird. Like there's all these like bird references when describing Ichabod Crane, and it's also very notable that he's like super skinny and lanky, tall,
And
skinny,
also,
and
like,
lanky.
birds I love birds, but come on, let's be honest, sometimes they could be very scavenger-esque, and kind of, like, trying to grab at things
And
and steal, you know?
ooh, great, yeah. So yeah, good call there. Yeah, it can be kind of like picking people's like goods. He's obsessed with food.
He's obsessed with food. He wants the lovely Katrina Van Tassel, who, I mean, and he doesn't really want her because he loves her, he thinks she's interesting or anything. He loves her because he sees her as this, I don't know, meal ticket, right? For,
Yeah,
she's got money. They describe her as what, like pigeon-chested and like just
another
ample?
bird reference.
Yeah.
Another bird reference, which is interesting. But no, there was a word that's used, and it's describing also a game bird. I can't remember what exact bird what bird they referred her to as, but it was like a game bird, like she's a game, like prey.
Oh,
She's
yeah,
the
she's
predator.
absolutely prey. Yeah, and
Yep.
she's like kind of, as the kids would say, probably like she's kind of thick.
She's thick. She's
Yeah,
plump.
which is
And but and that represents at this time
money, baby.
wealth. Wealth.
Yeah,
She's
yeah.
eating well,
And
right?
you know what? Here she is, and he's skinny, and he's hungry. So here's the thing, there's something else that Ichabod himself is representing, and it's like this more modern sense of masculinity. He looks down on everyone in the community, he's judging everyone, he thinks he's better than everyone, especially, like, the indentured servants, obviously. He thinks a lot of himself, and he's thinking, like, I don't know, this is scary to the town and Brahm especially because he represents the sort of traditional masculinity, and Ichabod is like this changing culture where he's more of an intellectual. Maybe he's going to be someone who's
Mhm.
he talks about like wanting to be a pioneer, even though he could never really do that. But he is this sort of intellectual. It's a different kind of masculinity, and that's another theme in here. It's like people fearing change, I think,
Yeah.
and an outsider. So is
So
there anything else you wanna kinda talk about
yeah,
with
because all right,
Ichabod?
so we already said he's like I don't know what you would call, but he's like a school teacher that, you know, a traveling school teacher, I guess you would
Mm,
say. He's from Connecticut, which
fancy. Yeah.
that says it
Yeah.
all. No, but like I do think he represents the idea, like you said, of like this more modern version, academic version.
Mhm.
Um, there's this idea though that like that's like a smarter version of a person. Yet he carries around two books:
Yes, he did.
Farmer's Almanac and Cotton Mather's. What is it? The
New England History of Witchcraft. Yeah.
New England History of Witchcraft, and he's obsessed with that book. So here's
So
the
he's
funny
into
thing:
superstitious, right? He's
he's
very
into
superstitious.
considering he's academic, he's into this. He's like obsessed with this stuff that's like very like not academic, I guess
Folksy.
you would say.
Yeah, like
Yeah,
folksy, right? So
folksy. Um, I mean, this is after the Salem witch trials. What years were the Salem witch trials?
Salem's in 1692, so way after.
So way after. So
Yeah.
he knows by now, but he's still like, even though he's so smart, quote unquote, he's still
Yeah.
obsessed with this stuff that's like kind of old fashioned and kind of like, so I just thought that was like a really interesting kind of thing.
And here's another thing too. Cotton Mather was a real danger to the rural folks in Salem. And maybe that's the like Irving's way of saying, hey, Ichabod Crane is a real danger to these
Yeah.
rural folks of New York.
It does feel like Washington Irving here is like using that to describe something about like almost like contradictory about
Yeah.
this idea of this
Yeah,
like
yeah.
academic kind of guy who comes in thinking he's all smart, but then he still like is fascinated or obsessed with like witchcraft and things like that were very problematic.
Now, do you
Um,
think, just a question for you, do you think that Washington Irving kind of being self-deprecating, like, because he's conflicted in a sense? Because here he is, this academic, uh, an author, and he has a real sort of reverence for this town, which is kind of rural and
yeah.
laid back. So it's like,
Well, that there's something about the headless horseman that I'm going to get to that I think might explain a little bit more of Washington Irving's own view, not political views, but kind of views about like society and what he feels important. I actually don't think he likes Ichabod Crane. I think Ichabod Crane is written almost as an antagonist, even though we see him as a protagonist
yeah.
in some forms of our readings, right?
Well, at least some people do. I mean, that's
Like we
where,
said, we both did as a kid
yeah.
watching that version of Disney's version of this.
And I'm
I
gonna try to rewatch it to be like, let me see if I can hate this guy.
I'm gonna do the same. So when he does travel, here's some other things that are kind of icky about Ichabod Crane. When he travels,
Icky bod.
he, he doesn't make a whole lot of money from the school teaching. It's a modest salary. So what he does is he lives with people in the towns that he's traveling to, and he likes to uh, live with the families who have pretty women in the home and that cook a
Hmm.
lot. So he's
Hmm.
very much into like women and food. That's like his obsessions, right?
Yeah,
Witchcraft,
he's
superstitions, witchcraft, food and women. So that's
like
where he lies.
swoop in, take what he can, and then swoop out like a bird.
Yes. So he gets this obsession with Katrina.
Yes, he does. Which who could blame him? The way she's described, it's like I'm hungry and I don't know, aroused. Is that is that too much?
You are right now.
Well, I mean, I mean, I guess.
That
So
might be a little too much.
sorry.
I don't know.
She's beautiful. Although I will say they don't spend a ton of time describing Katrina, besides to make it quite clear that she and her family has a ton of money.
Right.
And like this is the real
Well, they got this
jackpot.
farmland that I think he thinks he's going to make money from, or he is going to enjoy eating the food from the animals that are live on this farmland. He's going to like enjoy all the benefits of the farm. I
He's gonna
think.
ruin it, right? Because
Oh
he's
yeah,
not willing to do that kind of work. He's gonna ruin it.
he does work as part of his like room and board, light work from what they state, I believe.
Yeah, maybe he might milk something, probably.
Right. Right. Um.
I want to talk
So
a little bit about Brom Bones.
yes, and you know what? Before you say anything about him, watching that Disney version, we were talking about the how I used to view Ichabod Crane and how we see him now, like after this study. And I used to always see Brom as like what what is it, Gaston from
I
Beauty and the
wrote that
Beast?
down in my notes.
That's how I
I
always
literally
viewed
wrote a
him.
more likable Gaston
Yeah,
because he's still even in the original Disney, like he's still slightly more likable. been guest on us.
Yeah, but he's like, I always viewed him as like this like overprotective kind of like trying to muscle his way. He represents like old fashioned masculinity, muscle, strength.
Yeah, but he's also like kind of fun loving and he likes to do pranks
Yeah,
and like we saw him as a bully, but here he is in this story, it's almost like he's this hero trying to preserve the town from an outsider or, trying to this like idyllic setting trying to, preserve it from being kind of dismantled by the new way of doing things,
yeah,
right? People
yeah.
who care about, academia, not so much about appreciating work, hard work, and the farm, and like how, like, is this way of life going to change forever? That's kind of what this is about. Also, he really loves dogs.
And I don't think he's actually threatened by Ichabod
No,
until Ichabod does moves that make him feel agitated because it's like, who does this guy think he is coming in here? And even then, what does he do? Play pranks on him?
I know. Funny ones too.
Until like later on, he gets a little like probably a little enraged. But yeah, I mean, and one of those things Ichabod does is um when he sees Brahm, he's like, Brahm's her, we believe maybe her fiance, right?
Yes. It's pretty. It's not like in the Disney uh cartoon where it's kind of like fair game.
Yes. Yeah.
It's kind of like like we're both kind of on a level playing field. No one's real. She's not really with anyone. She's with Brahm,
Yeah. She is. She is.
you know?
And
And
then Ichabod sees Brahm's size and knows he has no chance to like
mhm.
challenge him physically. So instead, he decides to sign her up for singing lessons at a time when he knows she'll be all alone because her parents also won't be home. Super, super smart and creepy.
Yeah, he is. Prey. He's a predator.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
but Brahm teaches one of his dogs to howl the same way Ichabod sings, which is kind of awesome. I don't know how he does that.
Yes. Yeah. So he does those great little jokes. And yeah, that this kind of like dynamic plays out for a little bit, right?
Yeah, it does. And it's kind of this back and forth where it's almost like Brahms matching wits with him at the same time, where like he's supposed to be so smart, but Brahms kind of like got the upper hand in a sense,
Yeah.
usually, except in that it feels like Katrina could be interested in this new sort of um, it's something new, something
She's
strange.
entertaining it. She's not
Yeah.
being rude. She's at least entertaining it. Oh, one of the other pranks that Brom does is him and his buddies break into the schoolhouse and they turn all the furniture upside down. I mean, that's just an inconvenience right there. That's
And yeah, because then,
classic prank.
Ichabod's gonna be like, I've got a poltergeist because he's reading Cotton Mather's book.
Yeah. That's the greatest part. Like his pranks probably would scare Ichabod because he's into folklore, he's into scary stories.
Which
Um,
to me is like one of Ichabod's like redeeming factors. Like I really kind of
but
like
he's
that about
also
him.
very scared, which is
Yes.
funny. He's scared of the dark, he's scared of things, but he loves scary stuff.
Yeah, it's interesting.
Yeah.
Again, it's a paradox. That's kind of what this story is.
Mm, yeah.
Okay, so the best part, I'll kind of to me is when Brahm is starting to tell the story. Like they're at this party, right? And now I'm getting the story mixed up with the Disney cartoon.
Yeah. So they get invited to this along with the rest of the town to a party at the Van Tassel's farm.
Yes.
And there's
Talk
tons of
about food.
food. Ichabod's like eat like he's obsessed with all the food that's there. And then he's dancing with Katrina. Oh, and he gets a horse before he goes, named Gunpowder, because he wants to impress her. And
Yep.
Gunpowder is this like old plow horse who's blind in one eye,
Hmm.
which is amazing.
And
And
I hate to keep calling it back, but Disney did a great job sort of matching the description.
oh, 100%.
Yeah.
Yeah. And Ichabod on the saddle, they describe him as like this, like his arms are like lanky and they're like sticking
Yeah.
out and his knees are bent. And it's just this like I heard someone describe it as like a grasshopper
Yeah,
almost
yeah, yeah.
sitting on there. So yeah, he goes there and he's dancing with Katrina at one point, um and then there's the ghost stories. And I picture you, Greg, telling ghost stories at this party.
This is where I would shine. I would
You'd be
crush
like,
at this party.
excuse me, everyone.
Yeah.
One time a
Ahem.
ghost One time a ghost turned the lights on in my car.
Wow, you remember. I feel seriously honored by that. Thank you.
If you guys want to hear about that, make sure you go back to no, was that the Mercy Brown?
That was the Mercy Brown one, yeah.
That was an early one.
Yes, it was. That
Greg
was
will
a good one.
tell you how a ghost turned on the lights in his car.
True story. Just reach out if you want to hear it.
So yeah, the ghost stories, and Brom tells one.
Rom tells a real doozy about a decapitated
Doozy.
Hessian,
That's
right? Um, and he was decapitated by cannonball, right?
yes.
And this story is, he's kind of telling the story about how this, you have to get over the bridge to get safe from this Hessian. And there's this great fear by all Americans at this time of these German mercenaries because they're dangerous. They're trained fighters. The Americans at the time, they're like pitchforks and everything like that. So it's really like an urban legend playing to like innate fears. That's what urban legends do, if you remember, right? I mean, it's like, what are the urban legends, the popular ones? The headlights, don't turn your headlights on.
Yeah.
Or Halloween candy, apples. It's like apples with razor blades because it's like people are afraid that the gang violence is perpetrating the suburbs or drugs are infiltrating the suburbs. That's why you have like the LSD, orange juice, urban legend, or whatever. It doesn't really matter. But this is the same kind of thing. This is where it all kind of starts in a sense, like urban
Yeah.
legends, because it's preying on fears that already exist with a story that's like outside of it's bizarre,
Hmm.
potentially supernatural, but also kind of believable.
Well, yes. And like you said, it taps into a fear. I
Yeah,
actually have that passage. I'm just going to read it really quick.
please do.
The dominant spirit, however, that haunts this enchanted region and seems to be commander in chief of all the powers of the air is the apparition of a figure on horseback without a head. It is said by some to be the ghost of a Hessian trooper whose head had been carried away by a cannonball in some nameless battle during the Revolutionary War, and who is ever and anon seen by the country folk hurrying along in the gloom of the night as if on the wings of wind.
Yeah, and
And
you
it's
hear making that sound like ah, and like running with the horse, like clapping. You can just picture that. See,
yeah.
this is why Irving is like a genius, and this is why it still sticks around. He has this ability to kind of paint a picture and put you in that space. Like I
So
can see that.
the idea that this figure rises from, rises up at night and roams around looking for his missing head
Hmm.
is just amazing.
It's great. And do you think that Brom just came up with that on the fly, or is that a legend? Is that
I
kind of like a
think it's a legend from because I believe that tale is kind of already known by some of the people there. I think they refer to it at the beginning. I could be totally off base. I thought that
okay.
they were kind of already familiar with it, and he was kind of playing on because he says he races that horse, the headless
Yeah,
horseman.
yeah,
That's
yeah.
his
No,
story.
he says like the headless horseman like essentially like owes him a drink or something.
Yeah, yeah, because he
Yeah.
beat him in a race, and
Yeah.
then that's his his big moment that he's talking about, and
And so
um,
he has the courage to say something like that where Ichabod would is so superstitious he could never kind of even
yeah.
utter a sentence like that. I think that's so awesome.
I said before that there was something about the Hessian soldiers that I thought was kind of interesting. So there's like a negative connotation for them surrounding Hessians for Americans that was present I think at some period of time, but also supposedly Hessians saw the Patriots as ungrateful subjects living in wealth for rebelling against their king, as well as for voicing sympathy for loyalists and enslaved people of African descent. Um, the part of that I was like, is that referring to Ichabod? Is that what Ichabod kind of represents? Was like that living in wealth and just kind of like rebelling against like so the majority of people in the Sleepy Hollow are like Dutch settlers, right?
Mhm.
And Ichabod kind of like represents this other version of what of like an American is, I guess.
Yeah.
I was wondering if that was kind of like
Yeah, no, absolutely. And
representative of
and
that.
Ichabod does at some point kind of really talk down to, the indentured servants and servants at the Van Tassels. Like he really kind of is offended by them. So yeah, um he thinks he's better than
Yeah.
everyone.
Yeah.
And the Hessians kind of felt that same way about the Americans, and they were better at they're almost like Spartan in the sense that their job is to fight. You know what I mean?
Right.
Which
Right.
is kind of cool in a way,
Yeah.
you know. But yeah, no, just kind of you know what's another interesting sort of thing in terms of psychology for us is where Ichabod Crane is driven by his superstition and his fears, he lets that be his compass over reason. And we can talk about that in terms of anxiety. That's what anxiety is. Anxiety is like this weird kind of thing that's always trying to protect you in a way. Just like superstitions are kind of trying to protect you, even though they're not based on anything rational or real. And that can become very dangerous and make your world really small. So you have to kind of overcome the superstition and do what you need to do anyway. And Brahm's able to do that. And Ichabod's not. Ichabod is like when we talk about anxiety in terms of, you know, you're the captain of the ship and your anxieties and fears and desires are sort of the crew pushing you in different directions. And you have to be like, no, I know you want to go here because you're scared, but no, this is where we need to go. Ichabod doesn't have that. He's driven
Right.
by his superstitions. And that's maybe that's a lesson in this thing. Maybe that's a little bit of a lesson in this thing.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Also, well, it's definitely a commentary on social classes and like we talked about in the beginning, like fear of changing society, even from this agricultural society to whatever it's going to be turning into in the future. Like Ichabod represents this is 1820, so it's like we're shifting from strictly agricultural to maybe there's like lawyers and it's
Yeah.
there's more of a it's not like we're all working together on the farm. We all kind of take care of ourselves. We all kind of help each other out. It's like there's classes now. He's of a higher class, and that's like okay. Now we're starting to look more like Europe than this idea of America, where we're all kind of equal.
And I wonder if like the idea that Ichabod goes home at night in the woods kind of represents like this lack of like respecting some of the old like he's so into like folklore and superstition, yet he does something that is probably not advised by the people that live there.
Yeah, because it wasn't told to him in one of his books. It was told to him by one of these lower people that he can't trust. So
Sure.
despite his own fear, he's going to go do it's like this is the one time he should have listened to his
Right.
fear, you
Yeah.
know?
Yep.
So
Um,
not knowing when to listen to your anxiety or your
sure.
gut, that's another kind of cool thing. There's so much. There's so much in here. And this might be I know that they say that Nellie Butler, there's this story of like the Captain Butler's wife, Nellie, that's so if it's from like 1799 or something, it's the first American ghost story. That's the only reason why I remember that. It's because it is the first American ghost story. But this is like up there, maybe number two as far as like ghost stories. And I thought maybe it'd be fun if we just did a quick little um pop culture run through before we did any more final thoughts.
Well, just to kind of summarize how that plays out. So at the end of the party,
Yeah. Sorry.
he goes to speak to Katrina, and the narrator claims he doesn't know what's said between them, but it is implied that Katrina rejects him.
Hmm.
So when he does go into the woods, he's kind of going in dejected, right? So that kind of adds to that element. Like even with all that he thought he had going for him, he's now walking away, not the winner of the woman that he thought he was going to be the conqueror of. And
Which
then
is a
he
little
walks into the
sympathetic,
woods.
which
Yeah.
is a little complicated, right?
Yep. Yep. So then he walks into the woods and starts to hear noises. He prods his horse Gunpowder to move quickly, and the horse starts to stumble off the road, and then he notices a figure that is also on a horse, and as that figure starts to slowly come up to him, he notices that the figure does not have a head, and he carries his head in his lap. So he kicks Gunpowder again, and the horse starts to run, and then they start to do a chase. Let me see. Where does he go from there? And then he looks over his shoulder as he reaches the bridge, thinking that he had lost the horseman, but he didn't lose the horseman. Instead, the horseman throws his head at Ichabod, who was knocked to the ground by the blow. The next day, Ichabod is nowhere to be found, and the horse Gunpowder shows up alone at the Van Rippers farm.
Yeah, and it's in the story, it's kind of again up for interpretation. Like it doesn't explicitly say like this was Brahm,
Right.
but I mean, I think it was Brahm, or you have to decide like is this was this Brahm Bones or was this Abraham? Or
Yes.
was this a ghost? Was this
So
the
then the ironic thing is Ichabod then turns into the new folklore because they go
yeah,
to look for him. They find a pumpkin and what his hat, but
yeah,
no
that's right.
Ichabod. And some believe that he was taken away by the headless horseman. Other think that Brahm played a trick on him, like you said. Um, marries Katrina, and he kind of laughs at the story when at the part about the pumpkin, the smashed pumpkin. So, like you said, it's up to interpretation. But then we hear that years later, there's a visitor that swears that Ichabod is alive and living in Manhattan and is a successful lawyer, politician, writer, and judge.
Yes.
And then the final part of the story is that the story concludes with Knickerbocker, who is the person that we talked about at the very beginning of the story,
The
who
narrator
claims,
section.
yeah, who claims to have transcribed the story as he heard it. Um, he describes the story as being told by an older country gentleman who was mostly met with laughter, except for one person who was very serious and also very tall. And he starts to question what's the moral of the story. And the storyteller says there's three lessons. The first is take a joke as we find it. The second is competing with someone who is sure to beat you is foolish. And third, that some losses in life lead to better opportunities in the future.
Which is a great lesson.
Great
Like
lesson.
thanking God for unanswered prayers. And what's cool is go ahead, because this is cool.
I mean, it is thought, it's
Hmm.
implied, or, potentially just kind of like something for the reader to gauge that that's probably Brahm telling the story and Ichabod who is questioning Brahm because all three of those things happen to Ichabod,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. And Ichabod's crushing it in life, so don't feel too bad about him like
Yeah.
falling off his horse.
Yeah.
And Brahm is too. So in the end, it's like, okay. And
And he doesn't change.
he doesn't change. He
Neither
is
of them
just
change. Neither of them. Well, I guess Ichabod changes because of that experience. So he changes. But the funny thing is, Brahm doesn't change. And Brahm's still happy, still laughing, still just living his life.
still eating off that farm.
Yeah.
That's what
Yeah.
he's doing. And Ichabod is all the things that he's kind of wanted to happen. He wanted to be in this prominent position, and he is.
And
Um,
it's almost also like Ichabod needed to find his way. Like it almost like Washington Irving saying, like, Ichabod didn't belong
mhm.
in Sleepy Hollow.
Oh
He
my God, that's
belonged in
another
the
great
city,
lesson.
right? And I don't know that that's a good lesson to
It
tell
might be
people,
though. No,
but
but look, you have to be around the people who get you.
sure.
That's a good lesson, right? We are herd animals after all as human beings. If you're around people who don't see your value, I mean, you're not gonna have a fulfilled life. That's why we talk about when, in therapy, we talk about people's relationships and who they spend their time with because those things are important.
Yeah.
So that
With
that might be one of the another important lesson in this, and it's like, hey, look, like you don't. I know that's how it does feel kind of weird to say.
I guess another way to look at it that's not negative either is also like the same qualities that made him creepy or like predatorial
Hmm.
in Sleepy Hollow make him successful in the city.
Yeah, that's right.
So
Fish out of
you
water.
gotta you gotta utilize those strategies where they will be successful, not in places where they are become ill-intended because
Yeah,
that's just not the way that that society runs.
it's almost like in the Amazon or not the Amazon, like what are they? The Everglades in Florida when like people have like weird pets and they put a anaconda in there and it just eats everything else and it ruins the whole thing. Yeah, it's kind of like that. Um, or maybe nothing at all like that. But can we do the pop culture now? Because there's some cool ones.
Sure.
First of all, we don't need to shout out the Disney one again, but geez, if that's a huge recommendation.
I actually have the vinyl for that and
That's
I love it.
awesome.
Yeah, the
That's
cover of
awesome.
it is very cool.
Well, even in Christmas time, I do the big I do White Christmas, the Bing Crosby. I love Bing Crosby. I think he's cool. Scooby-Doo had a lot of Headless Horseman going on. He
Mm,
was kind of around there a lot.
yes,
There was the Sleepy Hollow with Johnny Depp and Christina Ricci.
great
I
movie.
I think that's a great movie. Tim
He
Burton.
very much scientist in that movie. Like the character Johnny Depp plays is,
But what is it, Dave? What do you think though? Because like honestly, every time you see Ichabod in portrayed in pop culture, he is the positive, like he's the
I
heroic
think it's
figure.
hard to have a main character be the problem.
Hmm.
So it's like I think when they adapt this story, it's a lot easier to make Ichabod like I said, the protagonist versus the antagonist,
Yeah.
because you get connected to them. You want to be connected to the main character. You don't want to be looking at the main character all the time, being like, "Wow, this
I
guy's a
mean,
creep."
obviously, people like society today identifies more with Ichabod because he shows up in everything. You don't see any shows with Brom Bones. Um, there was a detective show called Ichabod Crane.
No, Sleepy wasn't that also
Well,
Sleepy Hollow?
Sleepy
Yeah,
Hollow,
yeah,
Sleepy
yeah.
Hollow. Yeah, and
Yep,
he was
I
like,
remember that.
it was like Ichabod Crane, but like somehow he was from the past, but he was like solving modern
Like
crimes,
modern, yeah, yeah,
which is all right,
yeah.
fine. And there was one with Nick Carter from Backstreet Boys fame.
Really.
Yeah,
There's
um,
also one with Jeff Goldblum.
there is.
And yeah, I actually only know it because I was looking for a copy on eBay of the book, and the VHS for this Sleepy Hollow with Jeff Goldblum was on there. I
From
think
the
it might be a
80s?
made for TV one,
Oh,
like back
wow.
in the 80s.
There was one from the 20s too, but um,
Really?
yeah, yeah, 1922, I think.
Huh.
Would have been cool to get to see that one, but I mean, Headless Horseman, right? The name of the story could be Headless Horseman. I mean,
Yeah.
it's become this symbol for Halloween and hauntings and
There was a ton of like Headless Horseman decorations this year at stores for Halloween. So I feel like he's getting a little bit of a resurgence.
yeah, he's
Very
coming
cool
back.
character. He's coming back, baby. He's
Oh
back in
yeah, and
style.
what about him as a character? Let's hear his story. I guess we did in Sleepy Hollow, the Johnny Depp movie, Christopher Walken, right?
Hmm.
Was he sympathetic in that at all? Like, did
I
you
can't
kind of like?
remember. I can't remember. I gotta
I
rewatch
may
that
want to do a
again.
rewatch on that one too.
Yeah. Yeah, it's the
Well,
Headless Horseman Halloween this year.
yeah, maybe I'll be that for Halloween.
Do it.
I can't being Mr. Clean already.
Oh, again.
Again. Yeah, again. Well, Dave, I didn't know if this had enough juice to be an episode. It's kind of a different take for us, but this is, I guess you could slap a Halloween special label on this thing, right? And put it out to
Why
print.
not? What do
Why
you
not?
mean? What are you
I
questioning? And there's plenty with this. This had a lot of themes in it.
I actually really love this story. There should be, I mean, I think there's abridged versions too that are a little bit shorter because there's a lot of
I'm also just gonna put this out there for people who don't want to read it. There's a ton of audiobooks available on podcast streaming
oh yeah.
places and YouTube. I listened to one on the way to work one day just to kind of brush up on this, and it was easily to digest.
Yeah, it's like a buck 20 though. What is it? Like an hour? Almost an
Yeah,
hour.
yeah, it was like an hour 20 minutes or so. Yeah.
Yeah, that's that's not short. Although it's kind of one of those stories where it's like a must read, I think.
I think so too.
You kind of have to have this one in the vault.
You should at least know about it. And the
Yeah.
cemetery, the Sleepy Hollow Cemetery, is one of the most beautiful cemeteries, just in general. I love that cemetery. I thought it was great.
Okay. Well, there you go. There's
It's
another
huge.
cemetery recommendation by Dave.
And there's the bridge, which is not the real bridge, but I guess I don't know if it's like a made bridge, but they're in the cemetery. There's like a bridge to represent the bridge
Mhm.
from the story, but the actual bridge is right before the entrance, and it's not scenic at all. So there's a scenic one in the cemetery.
Okay, so
I'll
wait,
post my video from the
the actual
video.
bridge that was the area where this
It's like
existed
the regular street bridge that you
is
go
now like
over.
a just kind of a street.
Yeah. But there's a plaque on the real bridge. And then, like I said, there's in the cemetery, there's this beautiful like wooden bridge.
Okay. All right. Sounds good to me.
So yeah.
All right. Well,
Well,
that's Sleepy
next
Hollow.
week is our real Halloween special. You keep saying Halloween special. Next week is our real Halloween special because that's Halloween week next week.
Yeah. Okay.
This is the week before.
These are all Halloween and they're all special. So it's a big month. Just
Every
like Christmas
week's
will be.
every episode special. Just the
Yeah.
fact that we actually got it done.
It's always impressive. It really is.
Hanging on by a string.
Hanging on by a string. Like my whole life, I feel like.
Any housekeeping that we need to do?
I don't think so. Just please, we haven't seen any reviews on Spotify in quite some time.
This
Wouldn't
guy.
mind a couple of those.
They don't do reviews on Spotify, so
Oh,
you've
well, like,
never seen one ever.
no, like, I want to see the stars going up, up, up,
Apple.
up. So that'd be good. And Apple
You
too.
sound greedy as hell right now.
I know. I'm like
Give them something
a
to
bird of
review,
prey,
Greg.
just gobbling up those stars.
You got to give them something.
I told you, if we get 5 reviews, well, no, anybody who writes a review and they want a recording of my own personal ghost story, I will send it to them.
Wait, how do they get this?
Well, I will record it.
No, no, no. What do they have to do in order to get your
To-
personal ghost story sent
in
to
order
them?
to get my personal ghost story,
Write a
they
review
write
on
that,
Apple Podcasts,
you go
and
on
at
Apple
the end
Podcasts,
say "Me wanty Greggy ghost story."
yeah, and don't hit like 3 stars or something. You're not getting it. This is
Five
a five
stars,
star request,
full review at the end. Me wanty Greggy ghost story,
and you will get it. And just
and
give me your email.
and then message us on social media or utgnpodcast at gmail.com. Email us to let us know you did it. And Greg is I really want someone to do this.
Yeah, I would promise I will do it.
I'm gonna call BS right now.
I will do it.
Please test him. If you
Please.
made it this far in the episode, you're actually still listening. Test Greg. I want to see him. He doesn't even know how to do a voice recording. First of all,
I
that
will
is the
learn.
funny thing right here. He's gonna learn. All right, all right.
I'll do all this.
I so swear to God, I hope somebody does this. Please do this just for my pure enjoyment and
Yeah,
amusement.
and once we get it recorded down, it's like whoever wants it's got it.
No, 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 no. Personalized.
Okay, fair enough.
Not. I want it. I want it to be
Fair
like,
enough.
hey, at um Kyle dot whatever. Like I want it personalized to them, Greg.
No problem.
This is what the people want from
They
you.
got it. They got it. I promise.
Please make this happen, somebody, everybody. All right. Yeah, that's great. That's great. All right. And then one more week of a spooky episode, and then we'll get back to somewhat normal stuff.
Hmm.
We
We'll
got
lighten it right up.
Are we? I can't remember. We already have one for November because somebody suggested something. We're like,
Well, we got to get back into the I'll tell you, November we got to hit a couple mental health ones because the graduate students, they love it.
mental health be healthy, man.
They love it.
Oh boy. All right, everybody. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Watch us on YouTube. You can see Greg's face as he says things like that.
I get too
And
close. Sorry.
he does. Yeah, so we're on YouTube with the videos or just the listening stuff.
Yeah, the
And
YouTubes or subscriptions or whatever are coming in hot.
oh boy. All right, everybody. Greg's delirious now. So we will wrap this up. See you next week for our last spooky episode of the month. And have a great week. I love you so much. So freaking much.
We do love everyone.
Everyone. All of you. Good night. Deuces.
Good night.